那说到写履历最大的 challenge， 那一定就是要提到我们离职或者是我们中途休息的时候，那我们到底能不能去掩饰，可不可以不要提，或者是对方看到我们履历会不会觉得很奇怪？那我们今天来听听到底要用什么样的技巧能够让我们的 career breaks 也有加分的效果。 Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管双语沟通力的 podcast， 我们希望带给大家最实用的沟通工具，包括了成功人士对全球市场的分享，职场英语的技能，跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。Hi, I'm Sherry, founder of Executive Plus. As a language trainer and certified coach, I've trained hundreds of managers from Fortune 500 companies such as Dior, Google, Deloitte, and Yahoo.
And I'm Nick, Director of Communication Strategy at Presentality. I've helped startups raise millions of US dollars in funding and train the executives of publicly listed companies to present on the global stage.
Welcome to the Executive Plus podcast,
where you can take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Executive Plus podcast. Today, we want to wrap up our discussion on CV by covering something that a lot of people may have experienced in the last year, year and a half, or a lot of people may have experienced when starting a family, and that is explaining career gaps or gaps of time between jobs on your resume.
我们刚刚从大学毕业的时候，你应该都知道说 OK, career breaks 或者是 career gaps 是一个在写履历表的时候一个非常头痛的一件事情，而且是尽量不要有 career breaks 跟 gaps. But但是我们开始进入职场了，可能大家有家庭了，或者是人生中有的时候必须要休息一下面，那这个时候我们一定会有的时候可能休息个几个月，甚至到1-2年都有可能。但是 again 我们要申请一个新的工作的时候，我们又会不会觉得说这些 gaps 会不会给我们造成什么样子的 barrier， 或者是会不会让我们去 apply 这个新的工作的时候造成什么样的困难？ So what do we actually need to focus on in this kind of situation?
Most people's default is to try and hide the gap.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, if you can explain some of the skill sets, some of the experiences, or achievements that you've had during that gap, it can not only fill in the idea that you haven't been working in a corporate or a business environment for a certain amount of time, but it can show that maybe you're better for it. Or maybe you're also still ready to get back into it with minimum slowdown or minimum ramp-up time. You can just go because certain experiences have prepared you to get back into the workforce.
所以跟我们上一集其实也相同的 message， 也就是呢，我们不要去 focus 在没有的东西，而是 focus 在有的。So don't focus on the void,like this empty breaks that you had, but focus on the experience that you gained during the break. Maybe 你可能中间休息了一下，你可能去再修一个 different degree， 或者是拿了一个 certification， 不管是怎么样，这些 experience 带给你什么，带给这个新的这个工作有什么样的 benefit 或 advantage, definitely focus on that particular thing.
So, to give you a few examples of cases of people I know who took gaps in their career, for example, my uncle who had leukemia and ended up having to leave the workforce for several years due to the cancer coming back and forth, he actually decided to do his PhD and get it online because he could study and work based around the cycles of how he's feeling through chemotherapy. But definitely the end of that, being able to say, oh, well, I haven't worked for several years due to a cancer, but during that time I got my PhD.
And one of my really good friend, she took a little bit of time off from between jobs and she went to England to actually volunteer, to do some volunteer work at a farm. So instead of saying I took a break, she could say I gained a lot of experience by helping different animals, and that experience could teach her about her next job. For me personally, 刚从美国回来的时候呢，我那个时候还没有开始进入这个教学的这个领域，我就先修了芳疗的这个 certification. So I actually got a certification after a few months, and then I went into getting my master in teaching. So yeah, so I think everyone must have this kind of experience, right? You take a little break, but then you wanted to learn something, you wanted to kind of re-educate yourself.
Yeah, I've known a lot of people who have left certain careers, had a gap, whether it's for family purposes, personal, and they tend to pick up other kinds of certifications. I know people who will go and get like a professional coaching certification, a facilitation certification, learn a brand new skill. And a lot of these experiences, when highlighted, very similar to what we talked about in our last episode of switching careers, where you talk about the transferable skill or how this new thing that you have learned helps to improve the way that you deal with your career. So even something up to like getting a certification in meditation can be framed around stress management. You know, I left my career because I was under an enormous amount of pressure and it was really starting to cause cracks in the way that I handled things in my life. So by finding this way to really help manage my stress, I've become a much more calm and level-headed person. Finding a way to describe what you've done during this gap and how it can go forward can make a big difference when explaining what happened during this downtime.
So I think that's a really good example because 这个时候我们就开始进入了我们真正在写履历的时候。你了解了，知道说 OK 这个 career break 可能给我们什么样子的 experience 或者是什么样子的 skill set 还是你可以在 resume 上面可以提到的，这个时候我们就要把这些东西放在我们的 personal statements. Okay, so the personal statement is going to be the first thing they're going to see on your resume. 那这个时候 again, find ways to make your experience sounds like a gain.Sounds like definitely 是你所得到的，从这个 break 你得到了什么样子的 experience. Instead of saying 有些人如果比如说他 unfortunately 他被 laid off, 那他这个时候他可能就也是 laid off 的时间，这一段期间他去了学校重新修了个学位。You could say, you know, I went to evening college after I lost my job.但是 went to evening college after I lost my job 听起来并没有那种gaining of experience. 所以这个时候你可以说 I gained an associate degree in childcare to improve my qualification after redundancy.
So it's really about how you frame out this statement. Another example would be is, let's say during your downtime, you learned a skill that's potentially completely unrelated to any work experience at all. Let's say that I decided to learn piano. Then what I may do is go back and frame out that experience in terms of what it helped me realize or what it helped me gain. So it may say something is, during my downtime, I started to pick up new skills. For example, play the piano. What I learned from playing the piano is that the tricks and tips that I used to learn when I was younger were no longer relevant as an adult, and I had to redevelop a learning mindset that fit my mentality as an adult. And it made me rethink about how I gained new skills. And after doing this, I was able to learn much faster. Again, you're taking this experience and now applying it to the workforce. Is when entering back into the workforce, what I have learned about how I am educated as an adult is how I will grow faster in my career or how I will catch up to my colleagues despite having a gap.
On top of that, when you're gaining a new skill, such as, let's say, piano, that doesn't really have any relevance to your job, 这个时候你还是可以 focus 在比如说你学弹钢琴 definitely 你需要很多的 discipline and resilience. Right? You have to make sure you practice every day. So that's something that's an experience or a skill set that you've learned or developed during that break.
We hope that through this episode and the previous episode, you can really start thinking about what are your skill sets and how do you go about explaining them. One consistent thing, whether you're changing career path, whether you've had a gap, or actually just building your resume in general, is going a bit beyond the very basic or foundational ways of describing your skill set. And through this, you can start to rethink what are the skills that will help you stand apart? What are the experiences that will help you stand apart? And how do you frame or tell that story so that you don't sound like every other person who applies for a job? If you have any questions or you enjoyed this series on building out your CV, let us know on our Facebook or in an email so we know what kind of series to build going forward. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
如果你喜欢我们的 podcast， 欢迎来追踪我们的主管英文 Executive Plus 的 Facebook。那也可以写信到我们的信箱 yourcareerplus@gmail.com。